You're stopping, you're vaping and stuff. You're like, I'm moving on from this because it's bad for my health. So, today's question, Your Highness, is do you believe that people should visit zoos? Why or not? How does THC affect your memory?
All right, so what are your opinions on immigration?
Can social media make you feel bad about yourself?
Yes.
I've been seeing you eat chicken. I really want you to know that you should really stop eating them. Do you know what they have to go through before they are processed and grinded up?
What's something that girls should never wear? It doesn't matter what they wear or don't want to wear. It's what they wear. It's their body. They get to choose whatever they get to wear.
Do you think Barbie should just only be a girl's toy or a boy's toy too?
Sometimes if a boy wants to play with a doll, just let them play with a doll. Sometimes you gotta let them be free, you feel me?
What does it mean to be a social activist?
To try to improve things that happen around the world and try to get people to actually, like, I don't want to say it makes them sense, but try to fix and learn about more of what they're doing to themselves.
Well, my shirt is representing why not to take THC because it has a bunch of chemicals that can affect your brain, such as the frontal lobe, occipital lobe, all the lobes. I made like a monster. As you can see, it looks like a little miserable and stuff. And I even put it like made of an egg, gaming like nicotine sauce. Put a vape in its mouth. And then under it, I put a vapes kill. I did this so like it could remind girls that they're free to be what they want. Uno, dos, tres.
Friends come and go, but every once in a while you need a true friend.
They make you feel like you can be king of the world or even jump from a building unharmed.
It's true, a good friend is someone who always helps you, but never lie, always checks on you, but never ever be rude to you.
Always compliments, but never judges. Always values your opinions, but never ever threatens.
I once had a so-called friend at first things were cool.
But they became hurtful. When I discovered what they were really like, I felt angry. I felt, most of all, frustrated. I felt like I wanted to throw my phone into a never-ending ditch. So now when I look for a friend, I remember that it's about trusting them. Like rain trusts heart, or pizza trusts pepperoni. Honesty. I once told my friend I trust them, never being afraid they'll leave or judge me. True friendship is like the sound of cheering. It goes on all day long, keeping you feeling positive all day long.
Hey, what are you working on?
I made it because I want people to feel comfortable with their sexuality, to stand out more.
Why does it say that?
Gender freedom.
Privilege.
Focus.
What can you do in the Tech Cafe and what makes it a special place?
You can do. I feel like the Tech Cafe is special because you won't be judged for your work.
You waste your time. All of this smoking is your body.
And you won't be judged for who you are if you try to open up to anyone.
Soy del color azul, porque significa las veces que yo iba a la playa con mi familia. Soy de Venezuela. Soy algo nunca tolerará, la selva del Darién, pero siempre olvidará malos recuerdos, la música, que recuerda cosas tristes. Venezuela, Maracay. ¿Cómo se llegaron aquí? Crucé 7 países y ¿hay tiempos duros? Pues a mí la verdad no me tocó, pero hay mucha gente que si llega que no tiene plata, tiene que pedir en la calle, dormir en la calle. So this is their story and of how they got here to New York and all the drama they went through. And this is like a video that we can like explain to other kids so they can like feel what they felt. Some of us have to take risks from countries that we come from.
Like, if I'm having a rough day, I can come to a tech cafe. I can work on a project expressing how I feel. And it just makes me feel better being here.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So hopefully you want to continue listening and see how this type of activism, this type of voice and choice is enabled in a learning space. So why is choice important? In traditional classrooms, you often see that choice is limited, that teachers are at the center, it's teacher driven. And in a classroom where students get to choose the social issues they talk about, choose the tools and materials they get to use, you find that they really are driving their own learning. This is particularly important in a school where students are often disempowered and marginalized. So it's an alternative to the traditional classrooms. The engagement level is off the charts when you go see what happens when students actually get to choose what they're being activists for. It's intrinsically motivating. And here, as you might have seen in the video, these are the kinds of tools that we use in the Tech Cafe. We do sewing and laser cutting, cosmetics, embroidery, textiles, music, electronics, jewelry and metalwork, photography and pottery, bookmaking, painting, filmmaking, clothing design, editing, and woodwork. So these are some of the tools that we use. And here are some of the social issues, some of which you saw in the highlight reel, some which we're doing currently, including climate change, immigration, mental health, body image, plastic pollution, LGBTQ rights, animal rights, gun control, domestic violence, and vaping. The choice of social issues is often driven by the students as well. Within Google Classroom, I give a survey where I ask students which social issues they're most interested in learning about in a given year. So why is voice important? Well, this is an extremely formative period for identity development. And so allowing them to speak out about social issues really creates a positive identity. And, you know, they're taking this agency and they get to choose the tools. I mean, choice and voice are very dynamic. They intertwine, but by choosing these tools, it's also promoting a positive identity formation. And the way that the class is structured, I present a mini lesson in the beginning. And during that mini lesson, we do research together. We have class discussions, building community, building a sense of empathy as we learn about these social issues. And they're forming a deeper connection to their school community and outside the school community. And of course, by creating these projects in all of these different forms, it's writing, it's literacy in different mediums, in new mediums that they're passionate about. And of course, they're increasingly relevant these forms of writing and reading. And it promotes critical thinking when they choose to have a voice about a particular social issue, because they have to think critically about these social issues. There are no clear-cut answers to them. They have to discover for themselves who are the heroes, who are the villains, who are working on solutions, and who are standing in the way of that work. Some of the best practices I utilize are that I don't have a set time limit. Okay, that's the end of talking about this social issue and working on this social issue. Rather, it's very dynamic. As I introduce new social issues, they can continue working on social issues that they have self-selected or that I have spoken about in the past. And it can last weeks, months, or years. And along their journey, they can access any materials within the Tech Cafe. I don't have a quarantined area. You can't use these sets of tools or materials. Everything, as long as they're used responsibly, are available to them. So one thing you might be asking yourself is, well, how do they choose amongst these crazy amounts of permutations of social issues, tools, and materials? And the answer is that to help them not feel overwhelmed, the Tech Cafe has menus every month. So this is what a menu typically looks like. This menu was represented in a lot of the work that students showed off in the highlight reel. So for example, in June's menu, they could create a storybook where they tell the story of someone going through one of the issues that we talked about during the year in a simple way so that they could explain to kids. So I'll show you in a little bit, one of our students, Kimberly, who created several books, one on body positivity and one on bullying. And she ended up reading it to the third graders. It was a very powerful moment. They can do movie making, embroidery. As you saw in the highlight video, they can interview one another, take a camera home and interview community members, family members. So in this case, I said, find out what your classmates think of zoos and aquariums. They can sing songs. I'll be showing you a couple of the songs that students made that we have on our SoundCloud channel. For this one, it was make a song from the perspective of an animal trapped in a zoo or aquarium, or switch it up and have humans being held in zoos for the entertainment of other animals. They could do more traditional makerspace activities. If you've heard of a makerspace, you might imagine them working with popsicle sticks and glue guns and things of that nature. So this would be a more traditional activity where they're recreating a factory farm or a zoo in which an animal is trapped. And then finally, another option for this menu was to start a campaign to help free a monkey named Beamish that has been imprisoned for the past 14 years, experimented on, so they could create a movement with the hashtag Free Beamish on t-shirts, on art, on jewelry. So that type of activism is one of the ways that we get students engaged in the Tech Cafe. And additionally, along with each menu choice, I provide a scaffold so that they can get started. Do they have to use the scaffold? Absolutely not. But for many students over the years, I've found that it's very difficult to get started with these projects. And so for those students, for example, if they're doing an interview, they could ask questions like, do you believe that people should visit zoos? Why or why not? Why do humans have dogs and cats as pets, but eat pigs? If they're doing a song, I have lyric inspirations. So this one says, the cow overlords have come, punish all the humans for, and they would finish that and they would continue on with the song. And here are some words for animal rights jewelry. They could use respect, empathy, compassion. And I have lots of metal blanks, or they can cut their own metal, or I have letter beads. Those are the types of jewelry activities they can do, but then it can get pretty advanced. I anchor the work that I do using my website, techbrarian.com. It's a kind of a combination. It's an open access lesson plan for teachers across the world. And it's also anchors the mini lessons that I do with the students. So here, for example, is an entry. We are just finishing up a unit on how to increase happiness and resilience. So it's a mental health unit. And we are filling our toolkit with different strategies, such as recognizing and exercising your personal strengths, creating positive self-talk, recognizing negative self-talk and generating positive self-talk, and increasing the empathy that you feel and display within your friendships and relationships. So here, I posted a video about how to be a good listener. That would be an example of something we would watch together to deepen our understanding of a social issue. Another best practice is me being humble. And this space is so filled with tools and materials that are deep. Like, you can dive super deep into each one and become an expert. And so I can't do that for all of the woodworking and the metal work and the pottery wheel and all of these different tools, filmmaking and podcasting. You can become a true expert, but it takes so many years. And so what I do is I let the students become the experts, and then they can teach other students, and their work, the experts can serve as mentor pieces for other students who can then build upon that. And it ends up being a really successful practice where the projects get more and more sophisticated and powerful. I showcase the work when you come to visit me, which I hope you do. The Tech Cafe is like a big gallery. There's no empty space. Everything is filled with what the students have created over the past 10 years that I've been there. Also, during the mini lessons, I often show off the student work. And then one of the most important things we do within the Tech Cafe is get the work beyond the school walls, beyond the classroom walls, because that's activism. It's one thing to change things that happen within the school community, which is important, but it's also important for them to know that their work is going beyond, so that they can affect real social change broadly within their community beyond the school walls. So we have various media outlets, social media outlets that we utilize to provide authentic audiences. We have our Vimeo page that has more highlight reels and student films. We have our SoundCloud page. So I'll give you an example of a couple of songs that students have made. So Kayleen was one of our most prolific songwriters and singers, and she made a song about gun violence, where she took on the role, what it would feel like to be in an active, involved with an active school shooting, where she was in school in class. So this is just a little piece of what she wrote.
Another mass shooting at yet another American school. Some parents got to give their children big hugs of relief today, but for 17 families, there are loved ones who will not be coming home tonight.
This afternoon, 8 sites HQ clinic. While students reported the gunfire on cell phones in one classroom, police carried wounded students to safety.
Started in the classroom.
We're fine, minding our business, taking time on the ride. I started hearing noises and I started hearing crying. I looked outside, people started dying, crying, fighting, so good. And I started running to the door, yeah.
And here is another piece by Paul, whose family experienced domestic violence. And so he wrote a song about it, was super vulnerable. And here's a little piece of it.
For straight, I've been on the demon takes over to me. I be thinking about how many secret tracks on my mind. It's all on my mind, like nuclear bombs. Every birthday, gift my cousin a word. I better fuck my head, cause that's what daddy does. I stick got it too. That's what daddy does. Cause that's what daddy do.
If this was a 3-hour presentation, I would love to play absolutely the whole song and all the other songs. So please visit our SoundCloud page to hear them. We have an Instagram page where students show off their work. Earlier, I was talking about the keys to happiness and increasing happiness. And one of them was positive self-talk. So students created mirrors with positive self-talk messages. So this student, De Frelis, who was one of the Venezuelan refugee asylum seekers, she tells herself, fear is normal. It doesn't get in my way. So that's what her mirror looks like. And this is Joanne. She wrote Elegance and Glory. And here, this one says, I light up the world. We have our Twitter page, and we have our Etsy shop, where students sell their work and get to choose how they want to utilize the money for which charity they want to utilize it for. They create jewelry and paintings, embroidery, t-shirts. They sell their pottery and their social action pillows. So just as an example, this is some animal rights jewelry. This says Alto a la Violencia, stop the violence. And this is Kimberly. As I mentioned, she published 2 books, one on body positivity, one on bullying, and we sell it on our Amazon store in physical form and on Kindle. So what are the next steps? The next steps are for you to visit techbrarian.com if you want to utilize or just see some of the lesson plans that are out there. You can continue to explore our work, and you can email me and then come for a visit, because I would love to have you visit my school and check out the Tech Cafe.
That was so great. Thank you so, so much. Oh my gosh, those students are incredible. I loved seeing all of their examples. Thank you. So now we'll open the floor for questions. If anybody has any, yes, definitely feel free to unmute and ask any questions.
So hello, Dr. Lahana. This is Noah Golden in Long Beach, California. And I want to first thank you for your work and for this powerful presentation. It seems to me to have a lot of overlap with Educomunicación, which is an approach in Latin America of young people doing this kind of critical media production. And it's, in my experience, very uncommon here in the States. With such a policy world framed by Common Core literacy standards, with such of a focus on argumentation and zero focus on issues of power and representation. And my question is, why is it that we don't have more of these spaces in your experience? What are the sets of conditions that led to you being able to create this powerful space where young people can voice their concerns, engage in media production, take activist stances? And how do you invite, encourage, support other such learning communities in schools in the States, given how the policy realm is so antithetical to this vital work?
I think a lot of it starts with your administration, how willing they are to broaden the scope of what happens in a school and what it means to have true collaboration with other teachers. And for me, my my administration is super open to having me collaborate with my the other classrooms. And for our ELA classrooms, there is some wiggle room with all the curriculum to broaden what literacy looks like. And so for our teachers, they are permitted to show literacy through podcasting, through craft work, but it is, as part of that, they need to explain their work. So for example, if students were to create craft work, they would have to have beside it, just like any artist in a gallery would, an explanation of their work. So that's where the literacy component is contained within that. And with podcasting, they have to come up with a script that's relevant. And so I've collaborated with multiple teachers from multiple grades in order to do project-based learning that is aligned with the scope and sequence and the standards that, as you rightly say, they're they have to implement. So that's the short answer, that it's the administration who has to take the lead in many ways in expanding the definition of literacy and opening up the standardized curriculum to other forms of this literacy. And as far as whether or not this is happening in other schools, I think it is not happening with respect to having a space like analogous to a library. There used to be these centralized libraries, and they're becoming less and less common. You don't have as many school libraries as you used to. It's classroom libraries now. So in the same way, you don't see a lot of dedicated maker spaces within a school. Rather, you see making occur in a smaller scale within the classroom. They'll have maker centers, or they'll have project-based learning centers. So to be able to have those within a classroom is awesome. I think, though, what ends up happening is many times they just amount to STEM related or STEAM related and don't actually connect directly with the curriculum. And that's always the challenge, is you have to have someone who can help facilitate, or a teacher who is able to conceive of the connections between what they're learning within the standards on a given day and how to have something open-ended enough that it can be interpreted in many ways through different materials.
I love that answer. And just to follow up on that, in a lot of classes that I've been in, we get the question about pushback a lot. And these are very politicized things that we're looking at. Do you get pushback, and how do you deal with the pushback if it does happen?
I don't get pushback from my administration. I get pushback from the teachers who say, look, we have all of these this content that we have to get across to students. I have this math content that you can't possibly address with the types of tools and materials and projects that you do within the Tech Cafe. And I say, okay, come with your scope and sequence and let's work together. And I'll show you some ways that you could utilize these tools and materials to not only, address the standards and what you need to get across, because obviously in the end, there is a test for math and there is a test for ELA that the teachers are going to be held accountable for. And so you don't want to set them up with a series of activities that students would be better served doing more traditional activities. You want to give the best of both worlds, that they're able to utilize tools and materials that they're passionate about and excited to use, but also have the learning experiences that will yield academic results. And so, the proof is in the pudding. Like, they have to come in and we work together and collaborate. And that's part of what I've worked on over the past decade, is to figure out not just how to do social activism as my content area within the Tech Cafe, but how to broaden it out within the school. But yeah, certainly there's a lot of pushback with teachers, more than the administration, at least in my school.
Definitely. I love the open-ended product at the end of those lessons too, that idea, instead of just producing a standardized test again.
Yeah. And it's just been really amazing, the transformation that's happened at our school, where we're having students come en masse down to my room because they're working on scale models in their math class. And they're taking all of this clay and woodworking and cardboard and they're creating within their math classroom all of these projects that directly address the standards and the scope and sequence that the teacher is looking to get across. And it's just really neat that a teacher is open enough and sees that students are capable of utilizing these materials to do that. So it's been a slow but important transformation that's happened in our school.
Definitely. And Noah?
Just to pose a follow-up question. So my work is in teacher education, and hearing you share, Dr. Lahana, that there are fellow teachers who feel that this work is, it seems, extraneous or taking away from content. One of the things we see so much, particularly in the States, with achievement gap framings and the way the neoliberal education reform movement has worked, is in particularly racialized, minoritized communities experiencing economic disinvestment over generations. There's always this push for a back to basics mentality. There's always this push for, skills first. And that's what kids need to, with this myth of the meritocracy, pull themselves up by their bootstraps and all of that ideology. My question is, how would you suggest in teacher education we help teachers challenge that ideology to understand the vital importance of voice and choice, as you put it, of youth critical media production and engagement on major issues that impact their lives in and out of school? How do we make that more central in the work of what we teachers do, so that we don't have to see it as this extraneous add-on where people doing the work like you are getting this kind of pushback?
I think publicity. I think that students and teachers who are utilizing this approach have to document it, and that documentation has to come out during professional developments, has to find its way into sort of the popular mindset of teachers. They have to now start to understand that this is an accepted way, and this is a movie in my mind that I've seen 10 different teachers implementing this. And so, yes, I know that this is a way to actually meet the standards by doing this, and the kids seem so much more engaged with it, and they seem to be able to articulate their understanding and their learning in a way that you can tell they've taken ownership of it, as opposed to just parroting what their teacher has already said. And so I think the short answer is that if there is not a lot of documentation of successful practices that utilize this, then it's going to be hard to convince teachers of it. They have to see it in action. So if they're not going to tour a school and see where it's being implemented, I mean, we have several schools within New York City that are implementing this approach, and we had a cohort of teachers within something, it's called the Lighthouse Initiative, where we got to visit these schools who have school-wide initiatives to do project-based learning, is how they frame it, to meet their scope and sequence. And so either visit or find a way to have a central storehouse of materials, of videos that teachers can see in order to utilize this approach. But it's a tough nut to crack. You're absolutely right, Noah.
Thank you so much for that. I had a follow-up with a lot of the student teachers that I've interacted with are a little afraid to broach some of the subject matter that you've mentioned and showed in the videos. What would your advice be to them?
Gosh, I mean, the current environment, if you asked this 5 years ago, I would say, don't worry about that. Go for it. You have to realize that if you do want to have student investment and student passion, you can't create these false boundaries between what happens within school and what happens outside of school. There has to be a sense that if we're going to connect with our students, then we have to acknowledge what's really happening in their lives. If I don't talk at all about domestic violence, which I was scared to talk about it because I didn't want to re-traumatize the students. And yet, when I began talking about it, the conversations that we had were so deep, and the kids were so gentle and wonderful with each other, that the sense of care and empathy, you don't typically see that with teenagers talking with one another. And it opened up a door for that because we were doing that. And we also had last year something similar in how I felt about approaching a third rail issue, which is that we had 110 refugee asylum seekers from Venezuela come, and our school was only 300 students. And so it's suddenly a quarter of the population were now these students. And so the question was, do we just continue business as usual, or within the Tech Café at least, because it wasn't being discussed anywhere directly within the school, do we approach that as an issue? And so I decided that and you kind of see that in the film where one of the students is interviewing a couple of other students about their experience. And so one of the menu items that a lot of students did was to create a board game. And in that board game, they would go on to different steps. And when they arrived at a certain step, then it would have a scenario of one of the things that these students experienced. And then towards the middle of the game, it became more of a hopeful game where what happens now that you're in the United States, into the successes, the college and the career. So rather than just re-traumatize the kids, which was definitely not the goal, it was also to give students a sense of what what wonderful things are in store for them next. But it required a lot of research. We learned all about the Darien Gap and all about the countries and all about the reasons why Venezuela has been so unstable and has led to this mass immigration. So there was plenty of rigor in it. It wasn't just design a game, it was let's research this issue and then show what we know by creating this game.
That's perfect. And I see you were talking about literacy being like at the base of these projects, but I see so many interdisciplinary works at play with everything. So one final question I would love to ask. I saw some animal rights activists. My research kind of includes food and looking at human-food relationships. What's the next steps for the makerspace, if there are any? Maybe a kitchen?
Funny you should ask. We actually are building a culinary arts classroom and a recording studio. We have 2 separate grants that we're using for that. And with the culinary arts program, we're going to make a ton of connections with what happens within families. What are they cooking, and having it brought back to this space, but then advocating for how these meals can become even more nutritious. You don't want to say, oh, well, your cultural practices, what you're cooking isn't valid, but how can we create, what does it mean to have a nutritious meal, and how can we incorporate that into what you do? So that's part of it, food science, and they're going to be growing hydroponic fruits and vegetables. So it's going to be an amazing set of units. And we always talk about the meat and dairy industry, and factory farms is a big issue that we talk about. And then entomophagy, edible insects. If you go onto our Vimeo page, you can see a documentary where students opened an edible insect stand on Houston Street. And we had a whole mealworm farm in the Thech Café where kids learned how to cook them up, put sazon on it, fry them up, and everyone was like, no, I would never eat it. And then by the end of the semester, everyone was cooking and eating them. And it was deeply connected to climate change and animal rights.
That's so perfect. I'll definitely come visit the kitchen. That's for sure.
Please.
So thank you so much. I'm going to stop recording here, and thank you again for this amazing session.
Thank you for facilitating it.